Hey fellow tankers, Mobius Y here with another video for World of Tanks console. This is actually another episode of Tactics Talk, and I haven't done one of these in a long time, so this will obviously be quite different from the Tactics Talk videos of old. Now, at the time of recording this, I am quite stuffed up, so bear with me if I do sniffle a fair bit. Haven't really been feeling the greatest lately, hence why this video is coming out later. And because this video is coming out later than I wanted it to, I also didn't stream this last Friday, so if you're watching this video now on Sunday, February 4th, when I made this public, I'll be streaming later this evening. I will be starting sooner than my usual 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, sometime between 7 and 9 Eastern Standard Time. And I'll probably be sticking around for at least another 2 hours again, so if you're watching this later in the day, check the alerts in the bottom left or bottom right corners if they pop up saying that I'm live. Feel free to swing by the Twitch stream. If not, just follow the link in the description below to check out my Twitch channel, see if it's live at that moment, or give it a follow. Anyways, on with the video. A question that gets asked a lot is, what crew skills should I train on my certain crews for this tank, blah, blah, blah. This, that, and the other thing. It gets asked to me all the time. It gets asked to people I know all the time. Other good players I know ask me, or other platoon mates, or other clan mates that we have all the time. And the simple asinine answer is do whatever the fuck you want to do. The more real answer is it depends on what the tank is, and not specifically what tank class it is. A common question is, what crews should be trained for heavy tanks? Or what crew skills should be trained for heavy tanks? What should I train for light tanks? What should I train for my medium tanks? Well, you can't just separate what skills should be on a certain crew depending on what class of tank they're driving, because the classes of tanks don't differentiate themselves enough. I mean, for example, a T110E5 and a T57 heavy tank. They're both heavy tanks. They play completely different, largely because the T57 heavy is an autoloader. And then you've also got things like the T110E3 and the Grill 15. They're both tank destroyers, but they play very different. So you can't just separate them by class-specific differences, I guess is what I'm looking for. It is dependent on how you play the tank, as well as the built-in strengths and weaknesses of the tank itself. You can't have an AMX 30B with the same crew skills as a Batchat 25 ton, for example, your first several sets of crew skills, and expect it to go well. Or more accurately, an AMX 30 prototype is nothing similar to a T54E1. They're very different tanks. They play very differently. An AMX 30B is very different from a T62A or E50M. So you're not gonna give the exact same crew skills to the crews that are manning those tanks. That's the wrong way to go about it. It depends on what is effective with the tank. In this case, a good example is the AMX 30. It's a bit of a long-range sniper tank, and it has practically no armor, so for the most part, it's very opportunistic. You want to make a lot of flanking maneuvers. You want to stay at long range as best as you can, and try to stay hidden as long as possible. So you want lots of concealment perks, you want some gun handling perks, and you want things that make it better at driving places for big flank maneuvers, so on and so forth. The T54E1, not so much. It's an autoloader. You need to improve the gun handling as much as possible, its own mobility as much as possible, as well as some of its own spotting perks, quite possibly. But how I have the crew skills separated, which will hopefully help you guys figure out what the hell you want to train next, I've got these separated into several groups. There's a small group that I call the Essentials, which you want on every crew, no matter what. There are the Concealment perks. There are Utility perks, which can be nice to have and can really help some players out, but not all players might want them. There's Consumable-dependent perks, which are as described. They are dependent on the consumables that you use on that particular tank. There are perks for tank movement. There are perks for gun handling. There's perks for vision, and there's some very niche crew skills as well, which I don't really recommend training unless it suits the tank really well, or suits the tank class really well, or it suits your playstyle really well, or you already have like 20 crew skills and perks trained, and at this point you're just looking for icing on the cake. You already have all the performance crew skills and perks, so it doesn't matter what you train at that point. So you're just looking for a little something extra. And then there is a very, very small group of useless perks, which I will cover as we go on. So starting off with what I call the essentials. This should be fairly straightforward. Repairs, Brothers in Arms, Mentor, and I'll get back to that in a second, and Sixth Sense. Mentor is totally player preference. It doesn't have to be one of these 4 essentials, because some players like it, some players don't. Some players like having a crew skill that gives them an actual performance bonus over having Mentor. Mentor, it isn't a case of Mentor paying itself off. It's a case of Mentor being able to reduce the number of games you need to play in order to train your 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th crew skill by several dozen or even hundreds of games. Remember that the first 4 crew skills that you train on a particular crew, they require over 100,000 crew XP to train. A little bit over 100,000 crew XP. The next 4 crew skills, so crew skills 5 through 8, require double that, so over 200,000. And then crew skills 9 through 12 require over 400,000. Every 4th crew skill that you train, the next one will be double the XP required to fully train it up to 100%. So Mentor can really, really help with that if you already have a lot of crew skills on a particular crew, namely 12 or 16 or 20 or whatever. So it'll pay. It's not so much it'll pay itself off, but it will be a noticeable difference as you start getting a very, very well used crew. The reason why these are essentials is because you want to train these as your first 4 crew skills. If you're using Mentor, it has to be one of your first 4 crew skills. Otherwise, it doesn't really give you a heck of a lot of benefit. Sixth Sense. Some people might argue against it now that the targeting system has been changed, but it's very nice to know when you're spotted. It doesn't matter if people are pointing at you or not. Brothers in Arms improves the overall performance of the tank. It lowers your reload, and it helps the tank aim in faster. It helps you move a little bit better, so on and so forth. Repairs is just a must on everything, mostly for how quickly it will repair your tracks, but it'll repair all your modules quickly. So if your gun actually gets shot and destroyed, it'll fix it faster so you can get back to shooting sooner. So, as I said, all 4 of these should be on every crew skill. The exception is Mentor. That is totally personal preference, so that's kind of optional. If you do have Mentor on and you have all of your crew skills trained and whatnot, the maximum crew skills you can train on a crew is 25. So if you have trained your 25th one, you could swap Mentor out for something actually beneficial to the tank. Let's move on. Concealment. So these reduce the likelihood of enemies spotting you. The first obvious one is Camouflage. Moving on, we've also got Green Thumb. We also have, where the heck is it? Silent Driving. One of my personal favorites. And lastly, we have Muffled Shot. These all make it harder for enemies to spot you, basically. Camouflage, honestly, I think is a pseudo-essential, in my personal opinion. It should be one of your first 8 crew skills on just about every tank, even big heavy tanks, because it'll just make them that much harder to spot at really long ranges. Which can happen, like if you're getting into position, for example, on El Haluf, or if you're getting into position on Mountain Pass. If you're going to the southern areas, it just makes it less likely for somebody to spot you across the lake on Mountain Pass and have their team rain artillery or get side shots into you before you're in position. Green Thumb, harder to see when you're in a bush. This is really good for things like light tanks or even long-range TDs if you are very familiar with good bushes on the maps, but light tanks in particular, especially if you like passive scouting. Silent Driving, I think it could go on just about anything that isn't a light tank, but it's really good on medium tanks, because medium tanks are going to be trying to do those distance long-range flanks, and they want to try and stay unspotted. So it's really good for medium tanks. Muffled Shot is great for tank destroyers. Makes it hard for things to spot you when you are supporting the front line at a distance, and it's less likely that you'll be seen after you shoot your gun. There are some utility crew skills and perks, which can be very high priority if you like the effects that they give you. Track Mechanic improves the repairs on your tracks. This is actually really good on heavy tanks. so it could be one of your first 8 or 12 crew skills. So put this on your heavy tank crews fairly early, after you've already trained your essentials, obviously. But you do want this fairly early, and it could be argued that this is very useful on just about every class except artillery in the game. Super handy. Another utility one is armor. This is actually pretty good because there are some tanks where they get shot in the turret face for damage, and even if it's not for damage, their gun gets damaged quite a bit. So armor will help offset that quite a bit if you don't want to constantly be using a repair kit fixing your gun. We've also got safe stowage, which is super handy for tanks that have exposed ammo racks like the Russian IS tanks or Chinese heavy tanks. Their ammo racks can be very easily knocked out from certain areas even if they're in the middle of an engagement, trying to protect it as best as possible. So this will help increase the likelihood that your ammo rack will not be detonated in one shot. It'll still get damaged fairly easily, but it won't get detonated. And lastly, Eagle Eye. This lets you know if a tank has a damaged ammo rack or a busted gun and it can't shoot you. Some people swear by this. I've personally never used it. This is, again, personal preference. Probably one of your first 12 crew skills if you like it. If you don't, then, don't bother. Let's move on to tank movement. Starting with clutch braking. Where the heck is that? Right here, clutch braking. This increases your tank's hull rotation by a tiny amount, but faster rotation is good on everything. Heavy tanks can turn faster, allowing them to reposition sooner. Medium tanks and light tanks, it makes them easier to circle their enemies if they need to. Tank destroyers, it makes it easier for them to get their gun on target. It makes it more difficult for enemy medium tanks or more maneuverable tanks to circle them and get behind them. Artillery, it lets them turn quicker, get their gun on target sooner. We've also got off-road driving. This is extremely good for medium tanks and light tanks. Just helps them move around the map a little bit better. But there is an argument that this could be on heavy tanks as well, so that they could get back into position more quickly. And lastly, I actually lumped controlled impact into this one. It's a little bit more niche, but it's pretty handy on heavy tanks, especially really big ones that have a lot of tonnage behind them, like an E100, or maybe not necessarily that heavy, but you get the gist of it. Just heavier tanks, like even E50 mediums, which almost weigh 70 tons. That's a pretty big medium tank. Controlled impact can be fairly handy. Let's move on to consumable-dependent ones. These are strictly if you are dropping a particular consumable, for example, a fire extinguisher or a medical kit, in order to equip something like food or gas. So starting off with firefighting, this makes fires get put out quicker. If you don't have an extinguisher and your tank gets set on fire, the fire will be put out faster. Pain tolerance increases the toughness of your crew, basically. It just makes it harder for them to get injured or killed when there is a shot placed where your crew sits. Preventative maintenance reduces the chance of an engine fire. Strictly engine fires, not fuel tank fires, just engine fires. But this combined with firefighting is actually quite nice if you do not run an extinguisher, especially an automatic fire extinguisher, which gives a passive bonus of also reducing a fire chance. So that's super handy to have on there. And lastly, we also have Jack of all trades, which is also good, like pain tolerance, if you don't run a medical kit. Jack of all trades and pain tolerance can offset not running a med kit, because if a crew member gets knocked out, the commander can compensate for it better than if you simply did not have this perk trained. And pain tolerance is like a large med kit. It just makes it harder for your crew to get knocked out. And if you don't run as I said, if you don't run an extinguisher, firefighting and preventative maintenance are actually really handy crew skills to train in order to offset that. Gun handling. There's only 3 in this one. You've got smooth ride, which increases accuracy while the tank is moving. You've also got snapshot, which I shouldn't say increases your accuracy. It gives you better dispersion values, I should say. So the bloom won't be as bad. Your aiming reticule won't be as huge. For smooth ride, this only affects when the tank is moving. So like when the hull is actually moving. And for snapshot, it reduces reticule bloom for when the turret is moving. So together they actually compensate for any movement of the tank whatsoever. It's like a really poor man's vertical stabilizers, and it combines really nicely with vertical stabilizers. And the last one for gun handling is Deadeye. This is actually really good on things that either shoot fast or have auto-loading clips, because they have a higher likelihood of damaging modules or enemy crew by just a little bit. And tanks that shoot faster obviously have a better chance of doing this. Let's move on. Just the last couple groups here. We've got the vision group. So this includes things like recon, which increases your maximum view range by a small percentage, and it also if your optical module, the viewfinder module, gets damaged, you maintain more of your view range than if you didn't have recon trained. Situational awareness is just a flat vision range buff, so this combined with recon gives you a bit of an improvement on your overall view range. And lastly, for vision, designated target, marked any spotted vehicles that are marked by you, they stay visible for a couple seconds longer. So this is actually really handy, combined with situational awareness and recon on light tanks that do a lot of scouting, as well as some medium tanks that can double up as spotters. Now, I've also lumped in the two signal range perks and skills into this. That includes signal boosting, which extends your signal range or your radio range by a fair amount, and relaying, which increases the allied radio range. Any allies that are within your radio range will have their radio range increase as well. So it just makes it more likely that all of your allies will see enemies that are spotted on the other side of the map. That's basically it. I've lumped these in with the vision perks as well because they are quite handy, but they're very low priority compared to many of the other perks. So moving on, we've got some niche ones which can be handy and nice to have, but they're extremely low priority. The first one is Adrenaline Rush. It makes the gun load a little bit faster if the tank has less than 10% of its hit points left. This can be handy in a last ditch effort to try and get a little bit more damage in or try and save the game, but the mouse has 3,000 points of HP, and when it has 10% of its HP left, it has less than 300 hit points, and that is when Adrenaline Rush will kick in. So you're already a one-shot by that point. And on other tanks like tier 10 mediums, even then you still have to have like a whopping 200 hit points left. So it does happen a lot where your tank will be at one shot for quite a while. So having the slightly extra reload speed will be nice, but are you really poking as often as you can shoot to try and get more shots off? Probably not. You're probably playing a lot more cautiously. It can be nice to have, but I really only recommend it for things like heavy tanks because they can get the best use out of it. They'll have the most HP when Adrenaline Rush kicks in. Intuition, this can give you a small chance that when you switch the shell types during a reload, your reload will not fully reset. This is actually really handy on artillery, but again, it's pretty low priority. It's a very niche kind of skill to have. Moving on, we've also got, where the heck is it? Paratrooper training. Where the hell is it? This is a borderline useless perk unless you have a need for speed and have a really bad habit of hitting bumps or driving off of cliffs that constantly get your tank damaged. Apart from that, there's really not much use for it. It's not very handy on slow tanks because it's very possible to slide down cliff faces without taking damage. It takes a bit of practice, but once you get used to it, it pretty much never happens where you take damage sliding down a cliff carefully. But for those of you who suffer from constant falling damage, you'll probably see a bit of a use for it. And the last niche perk, which is extremely low priority, Call for Vengeance. This has it so that enemies that are spotted, enemies that you spot right as you get killed, will remain spotted just a little bit longer after your tank is destroyed. So it's similar to Designated Target, which will spot them for a couple seconds longer, but this will also make it so that enemies who are spotted right as your tank is destroyed will be spotted for a couple seconds longer as well. This is really only good for suicide scouts and other imbecilic playstyles, simply put. So this is honestly not really necessary to train at all. It's not really worth it. It'd probably be one of the last skills you train if you don't completely bypass it altogether. And then we've got useless skills and perks. And there's only one: swimming lessons. This makes it so that it takes 15 seconds for your tank to drown as opposed to 10. There is no reason to put this on any crew, unless you're just a troll who likes to try and get to hard-to-reach areas that are across bodies of water to try and piss off the entire lobby. Apart from that, there is no reason to train this. If you have a problem with constantly driving into water and drowning and losing games from it when you're actually trying to simply reposition and win the game, then this can have some merit. But if that is a problem for you, then you really need to rethink your positioning on maps in general, because this will not help you. The only thing, like I said, the only thing this would see use on are for people who are total trolls. You can't even put this on artillery players if you like to drown yourselves, because this will keep you alive for longer and make it more likely that the enemy team will kill you. So that pretty much sums it up. So like I said, essentials: repairs, brothers in arms, sixth sense, mentor. Concealment, really good for helping keep your tank hidden. Camouflage, silent driving, muffled shot, and green thumb. Utility skills and perks that can be quite handy to have. Track mechanic, armor, safe stowage, and eagle eye. Consumable-dependent skills that will basically replace you using either a fire extinguisher or a med kit. You've got firefighting, preventative maintenance, and jack of all trades, and pain tolerance if you don't run a med kit. Gun handling, you've got snapshot and smooth ride, and dead eye can also be used if you have a faster shooting gun, or if you just like increasing the odds of damaging enemy modules or injuring their crew. Tank movement, you've got clutch braking, which I think should be trained on all crews within its first 8 crew skills. You've also got off-road driving and controlled impact, which can be handy. Off-road driving in particular on medium tanks and light tanks. It's really good on faster tanks. It can essentially be trained on everything. It just helps them get into position faster. You've got the vision skills, situational awareness, recon, and designated target, which helps them stay spotted longer. And I've also lumped in signal boosting and relaying with this group. And then you've got the really niche ones, which are extremely low priority and are kind of just icing on the cake. I don't really recommend training them super early. Adrenaline rush, intuition, paratrooper training, and call for vengeance. So like I said, if you really want to get them, probably one of your last sets of crew skills. And then, as I said, useless skills and perks, there's only one: swimming lessons. So that hopefully gives you a much better idea of how you want to go about training your crews. And it depends on what you want to do. What do you want to work on next? Do you want your light tank to improve its gun handling? Start training snapshot and smooth ride. Do you want your light tank to instead be better at spotting the enemies? Give it situational awareness and recon. Or do you want to make it harder for your light tank to get spotted? Give it camouflage, green thumb, muffled shot, so on and so forth. But for a straight up answer, here is my opinion. The first 16 crew skills and perks you'll want to train on your crews, depending on what class of tank they are in. Now remember that mentor is totally optional, but I'm lumping it in with these because it's one of my 4 essentials. So for lights, train sixth sense, brothers in arms, repairs, mentor, camouflage, situational awareness, recon, designated target, green thumb, clutch braking, off-road driving, snapshot, smooth ride, track mechanic, signal boosting, and relaying. This will maximize the effectiveness of your light tank at spotting as well as remaining concealed, and give it the perks of better gun handling so it can get some damage in as well as circle enemies pretty decently. For medium tanks, slightly more focus on inflicting damage but also repositioning quickly for those long-range flanks. Sixth sense, brothers in arms, repairs, mentor, camouflage, clutch braking, snapshot, smooth ride, off-road driving, silent driving, track mechanic, situational awareness, recon, safe stowage, pain tolerance, and jack of all trades. This will make it so that your medium tank is maybe not as good as your light tanks at spotting enemies or remaining concealed, but it allows it to reposition more quickly, offering it the supportive role, getting those flanks in so that it can get behind enemy lines or beside enemies and get some damage into their weaker armor. Heavy tanks. Sixth Sense, Brothers in Arms, Repairs, Mentor, Track Mechanic, Clutch Braking, Pain Tolerance, Safe Stowage, Jack of all trades, Camouflage, Controlled Impact, Armorer, Off-Road Driving, Adrenaline Rush, Snapshot, and Smooth Ride. This will make it so that your heavy tank can take a bit of a beating. It'll help protect your modules and your crew a bit better because heavy tanks are meant to try and soak up damage. Maybe not necessarily by blocking damage through ricochets, but also because they have large HP pools. So this is why they can make use of things like Adrenaline Rush better than other classes of tanks. TDs, Tank Destroyers. Sixth Sense, Brothers in Arms, Repairs, Mentor, Camouflage, Clutch Braking, Muffled Shot, Snapshot, Smooth Ride, Off-Road Driving, Situational Awareness, Recon, Safe Stowage, Pain Tolerance, Jack of all trades, and Track Mechanic. This will make it so that if you do get in a situation where somebody's trying to track and circle you, your tracks will repair very quickly. It'll be harder for them to circle you because you have clutch braking. Your crew is a little bit more resilient to damage, and you don't suffer as big a penalty if a crew member gets knocked out. It also improves your capability of remaining concealed if you are in a long-range firing position, as well as maximizing your gun handling so that you can get your gun on target as quickly as possible. And lastly, there is artillery. Artillery is very different from the other classes, so there are some things which it does not need, even out of the essentials group. So artillery, Sixth Sense, Brothers in Arms, Mentor, Signal Boosting, Snapshot, Smooth Ride, Clutch Braking, Relaying, Off-Road Driving, Camouflage, Muffled Shot, Silent Driving, Off-Road Driving. Ooh, actually, I've said that twice, my mistake. Green Thumb, and Track Mechanic. And you could, I guess, also get Eagle Eye on an artillery class. I said off-road driving there. I didn't realize that I wrote it twice on this list. But what this does for artillery, later on it helps with your concealment so that you can try and stay hidden for as long as possible. But most importantly, it allows you to reposition as quickly as possible, get your gun pointed where you want it to go as quickly as possible so that you can get it trained in and pointing at a target as quickly as possible. And that'll allow you to just, be able to shoot your artillery and launch your scum buckets as often as you can. So that should sum it up. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of what crew skills you want to train on specific crews. There's obviously a big difference for things like autoloaders compared to traditional mediums and heavies and whatnot. You obviously want to go more for things like gun handling, like Snapshot and Smooth Ride, and probably Deadeye, sooner than things like concealment or what's the other one that I'm going for? Or the more utilitarian kind of perks. You can still train something like Safe Stowage because an ammo-racked autoloader is a borderline useless autoloader, so on and so forth. So it depends on the playstyle of the tank. It depends how you play it, and the class-specific differences are less important than that because there are different playstyles within the classes themselves. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of which crew skills you want to train in and in what order you want to train them on your crew. The lists that I just gave for the different classes, they're in no particular order. Train them in whatever order you please, but I still recommend that you do your essentials first. Repairs, Brothers in Arms, Sixth Sense, and Mentor. You want to train those on pretty much every crew as quickly as possible to get the maximum benefits from them. So thanks very much for watching. This has been Mobius Y with another episode of Tactics Talk. This did go on longer than I expected it to, and longer than I wanted it to. So hopefully you paid attention and you gleaned something from it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Happy tanking.